return to the amendments, as we are discussing them. Actually, I wanted to commend the sponsors of the bill, in the sense that when I read the bill, multiple clauses refer to the applicant's GP. But there is an assumption of an ongoing relationship with that GP. If there isn't, then we can come back to that. I had assumed that was it, that it was an ongoing relationship. And the noble Lord Rook has raised some of the real challenges to why that might not be realistic. The problem for me is, if there is no assumption of an ongoing relationship, but just simply a visit to a GP, it seems to me to be completely meaningless. You go in for a 10-minute meeting with a GP, transient, patchy at best, they're unlikely to be able to make any kind of a clinical assessment of great merit. Because the real-life situation, as I think the noble lady Baroness Sloss referred to not seeing a GP, but how pleasant it was, I thought I would do a little bit of lived experience here, which is, I've been in the same GP practice for 25 years. I've never seen the same GP. I've seen locums, I've seen temporary staff, I've seen physician associates who I thought were GPs and found out afterwards they weren't. No problem at all, you might think, but they've had no familiarity with my conditions. In many instances, I've had to say, would you please read my notes, as they looked elsewhere. And the consequences of this, and I don't usually, the consequence of this has been misdiagnosis, and not in a very positive way, any kind of a reasonable intervention in serious conditions. That is what life is like for many people. When the noble lady Baroness Gerarda, who, by the way, I am delighted to welcome to this House, and I know her maiden speech described the ideal GP, which she may well embody, I wish I knew more of them. I have friends who are GPs, but it's not the real life experience of most people in this country. Even the noble lady Baroness Gerarda said we all work in harmonious teams, and that she doesn't recognise the scenario of elderly people who can't get to see their GPs. Well, actually, that statistic was from Wales, and if you know anything about the Welsh NHS, let me tell you, I'm surprised any of them get to see a GP. The truth of the matter is that there's no point, the bill, as I was commending the sponsor of the bill, saying, well, it's all right because you'll get to see a GP. If you just wander in and see a GP for a short consultation, that is not what this holistic notion of a GP who can really act as somebody who can be a safeguard, who can really understand all that's going on in your life, which is what I, by the way, when I read the bill, had assumed and was flattering the sponsors of the bill for wanting. I was then going to ask them, but the real life's not like that. I actually think there's a serious danger if it's just a question of going to see a GP without continuity of care, that it just becomes a tick box exercise. You're just mentioning the word GP to give it some kind of medical authenticity, but it's of no real consequence. But I do have a degree of sympathy with the question, and if I can ask to be even-handed, especially the noble lady Baroness O'Lone, who spoke very well on her Amendment 20, but when I read her amendment, I thought, who on earth is ever going to have access to... I mean, home visits are mentioned in a number of the amendments. Home visits? Who's ever had a home visit recently? I mean, these are a thing of the past. And I know we're all getting on, but honestly. And I just think that I'm confused, because I want the bill to embody a sense of the GP being important, but that requires continuity of care.
I would just like to, if I may, remind the noble lady, and I thank her for giving way, but we are talking about people who are terminally ill. We're not talking about the general population.
I
was just finishing because it relates to this. I appreciate that once given a terminal diagnosis, that might be true, but not necessarily, by the way. Let me tell you. That is the honest reality of the situation. And so there's that. But what I'm saying is that we've got a moral dilemma here. GPs are being called on as though they're important to this bill, but if they're just passing and you haven't got continuity of care, then actually they're being treated with contempt. On the other hand, that demand that you have to have continuity of care before you can ever be offered assisted dying seems unrealistic in today's modern health service, in truth.